And I just wanted to welcome everyone today to our second ASCILITE Live webinar of 2020. On behalf of ASCILITE and everyone attending this webinar, thank you to Christian Moro, who's joining us this morning to talk about some of the innovations that he's been using in anatomy and physiology. Christian comes to us from Bond University and is one of ASCILITE's Innovation Award winners for 2019. Without further ado, I'm actually going to turn it over to Christian, who will talk to us about what he's been doing.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So there's a little bit of a formatting change there in the format, but that's fine. So my name's Christian. Hello from Bond University. I'm here with my honours student, Charlotte, who'll be helping us demo a little bit of the technology just to try and help and show you how things actually work. But a big focus today is the rationale as to why we use the technology, rather than just throwing tech at the students, is looking into why we use it. I'm actually somewhat tech adverse in many cases. I still use an old ruler instead of the laser pointer in class. I use pop-up markers as often as I can, just to try and get away from tech, but then use technology wisely, I guess, where it's needed and to fill gaps. So today we'll go through that a little bit. Going through what's happening at Bond University and what are we doing, what is effective. So every single bit of technology that I speak about, we've done research on. So we're constantly doing research. Charlotte in Honours, we've got a few PhD students and always students and staff working on the research underlying this, that if we're going to change curriculum or add something that's disruptive, is it beneficial? Is it helping or is it just confusing people? So look at that a little bit, and that is one thing. There's a gimmicky effect where the students might love it but not learn from it. So we'll see. The next thing then, what does the research say, and then some tips and recommendations at the end for something over the years, what we've found and where to use the money wisely, I guess, because there is some expense in bringing these technologies in. So look, there is a bit of a change in higher education, as we'll all know, which is very much moving to the online landscape. There's currently Austrade came out recently and said they'd like to have 110 million students enrolled in Australian universities by 2025. And we can't fit them all in the buildings, which means largely the government policy and the interest and the education landscape seems to be moving online. There's currently, with a push to try and grab 10% of the world market of education, Australian universities are somewhat encouraged to have online courses, big open MOOCs. There's currently 100 million students plus enrolled in about 900 universities offering MOOCs. This is the massive open online courses. The problem is that there's issues with it. I see the benefit of MOOCs, where if you're a parent at home, you can stay at home, you can watch lectures in your pajamas with a glass of wine. I see the appeal, but also there's about a 10% retention rate. It seems like 50% of the MOOCs are in our science, technology, engineering, or maths, the STEM disciplines, and it's a growing field. So the question is then, why come to class? If a student nowadays has all this opportunity to enroll in online courses and MOOCs, the government's trying to push us into MOOCs and online learning because it brings revenue in without any extra infrastructure. Why come to class? And that's sort of where I'm trying to be a little bit different. And if students, not different, but if students are going to come to class, we really need to make sure we offer a gold experience. My entire use of technology and everything I'll be talking about is about trying to maximize that in-class experience. So when students come into us, can we use tech to make it a better individualized or collaborative learning experience? And that's it. So there's two streams, I guess. One is technology off campus, so how do we integrate things like iLearn and whatnot, but my interest is very much when they're in class, which means I don't really want to have students fixated on a screen doing nothing. I want to interact with them and engage and then teach by using the technology to help that teaching. In the idea that then what technology is different, if they can get it at home for the same, there's no point doing it at university. So that's my goal. Why come to class? Because you can get, even in a large cohort, an individualized experience. You can get collaborations, critical thinking, learn from others using modern resources, but very much technology can help us as one person in a room full of 40, 60, 80 other students in labs, for example. Technology can help me reach every student in a way that I couldn't before. So that's where I stand on this. I've recently done a design workshop, and it said use nice lifelike images. So the bears are irrelevant. It just came from that design workshop. So this is it. What are we doing to make it worthwhile when students do come to class? And this is, like I was saying, trying to use interactive technology to enhance the individualized learning experience. I'm using technology because I need to use technology in some respects, and I'll explain that as we go through. So this is very much in the classroom. And what do we do when students come in? And in the lecture theatre. There's a few things to talk about, a couple of terms. Virtual reality is very much sensory deprivation, where your entire sensory field, your eyes, your ears, your hands, and your kinesthetic activities are all in a virtual landscape, completely escaped from the current world. So virtual reality, by definition, is your reality is virtual. So it's a new world, and that's useful. For example, in a busy classroom, students everywhere, you can block out the world and completely have them enclosed in a learning environment where that's where they learn. So there's a use of that. Mixed reality is a bit of a mixture between the two, and I use that term as well, where you can see other people and you can see the world, but there's some sort of enhancements, and there's devices that do that. Augmented reality is the other one, where you're simply in the space, but there's a digital enhancement. So, for example, I'll show you using your smartphone for Pokemon Go is augmented reality. You're in the world, but you can see a model in front of you that's not real. So, 3 different kinds of technologies that we'll talk about. But starting to look here at virtual reality. So this is the Oculus Rift. I'll get Charlotte to hand this over. This is an example of what we use in virtual reality. And so this is very much, I don't like students to be in VR very long. All these photos I'm showing today I've taken myself. They're all of students in my class or using certain things. So this is something where we actually need to get a student out of the classroom into a virtual environment. I use this, for example, for the skull in anatomy to really get focused on just nothing but that model. Let's block everything else out. For example, we'll be doing cadavers, and I'll have maybe a 5-minute max station in VR, where we'll go across to the back of the room, they'll put on the headsets, they'll be able to block everything else out and just see certain features of a model and just focus on that, take it off, come back to the cadavers, they now understand a bit more. So I use VR for things like the brain stem, which you can't really see on the plastic models or the real life specimens. So try to augment or enhance the teaching that we're doing, where there's little gaps in what I can do myself, putting them into the virtual environment and getting them to understand that. So you can see there's a spine and pelvis there, because we actually go down, we put the spine up and go through the spine as a hollow organ. And then also the skull, because it's 3D, and looking at the sutures between the skulls, which isn't as easy for me to do otherwise. So that's an example there of our students' VR. We've had a couple of different things. We've done the heart. There's a few of our staff who've been working on it. One of the ways that we do VR is to really get we make everything ourselves. So it's something that, how this came about was I was trying to teach the eye muscles. Now, how do I explain that this muscle moves the eye in that direction? I don't know how clear my video is. Hopefully you can see it. But how do I explain that the eye muscle moves the eye in this direction? It was very tricky. I'm not a very good drawer. And so years ago, this came from just a necessity that I wasn't able to either scribble on the board. A 2D PowerPoint didn't show it, but I couldn't really show movement and motions and muscles in 3D space properly. So instead of going to a conference, we pulled a bit of our professional development money together and said, let's get one of the IT guys to come to the faculty and teach us how to create apps. And so three of us spent about 1.5 years ourselves just learning coding and learning app development, with the sole rationale to fill that gap where we were limited by our own abilities. And that's where technology comes in. So I feel that using something like VR, I'm now able to explain a bit better things like the brainstem that I really couldn't draw, couldn't show. It was 3D. So it fills a gap and it fills an area of need. And that was very much the point. This has all come out of necessity. Rather than just we want to put VR into our labs, it was very much I can't teach this any other what is out there that can work. So that's an example of where virtual reality came in. Sensory deprivation. There are a few issues. Our students have found some of them find it quite discomforting. They get a little bit woozy from it. Nothing's more than, I think the longest lesson I have is 6 minutes on lymphatics, but we're talking 3 to 4 minutes max. But it was a bit of a worry where, you don't want to have students come to your class and then come out dizzy. It's like, well, I don't want to learn and teach and have it working. So Short lessons works for that, but VR, I'm very adverse about it because they're away from the classroom and they're away from you and how we're teaching. I don't want the technology teaching for me. I want to do it, but that was the point there. So it's just one way that they can get a bit more out of the lesson. And this is very much run in stations. So the next tech, and I'll go back through things, there's a few articles there on it and how we use it in medicine as well. The other one then to speak about is augmented reality. So AR is something that I use probably a little bit more. I'm going to show you an example of it, if I can get Charlotte to help. Where's the tablet gone? And there's a tablet right behind me, right in front of me. Yeah, it couldn't have been clearer. So augmented reality, here's an example of a stroke, which we're doing, just teaching the brain. So I'll just stand up here. Let's see if we can get it in the camera on the bottom left corner. If you can still hear this. So if you have a look at the screen, behind the screen, I can hold. It's actually really hard to see. The camera's tiny. I don't know if you can see a brain there. And then with this, I can tap it. I can remove layers. I've got a little lesson here. Welcome to this augmented reality lesson on stroke. This is a model of the human brain. So what I've done here is a dome area called the cerebellum. A little bit higher as I talk about them. Tap on the regions to see their names and click on the dissect button to explore underneath. Yeah, this is a nice little, this is a 4-minute lesson, I think, where the students come along and they can dissect different areas. We can add internal features to see right down there. I've hypercolorized the brain because in this model, I particularly wanted to show the regions and really get that out of there. But it's something that we can get a lot more that I can really zoom in and show them and highlight little bits just for 4 or 5 minutes, and they can come back to the normal lesson and join us. So thank you, Charlotte. This is augmented reality, and I find this great because there's fewer wires than there are in the VR. In the VR, we have these, there's wires everywhere. You need quite a big computer to run it. AR works on phones, on tablets. I use it in lectures, actually. There's some free software. One's called Augment. I made that one myself, but there's some free ones you can do. You can import a model in. But I've really found this technology, and the problem, I guess, is if you don't know how to code, it's a bit tricky to make it up, but there's lots of free ones out there just to give that 3D model to students. So I have them getting their phones out in the lectures. Actually, I use the same model of the brain, get their phones out in lectures. As we're labeling the brain in 2D, they have it on their phone in 3D and they can see it. So if you just type in free augmented reality app, there's a bunch now that you can port a model in. Some have dancing skeletons that are kind of fun, that dance in front of the screen. So there's a lot there, but it's a way to use current technology. It's quite sustainable in the use of the word that it's scalable, that you can keep using it. There's no real cost. VR tends to be a bit expensive because every year we have a new update. Every year there's a new thing. Whereas AR, the phones are pretty consistent. One of my biggest issues actually with using phones is that link between Apple and Android. And Apple don't always play ball as much as Android do. So it's tricky when students come with different devices, but it's getting better. It's getting easier. So I haven't got half the class with Apple's not able to use the app and then half with Android's able to use it. It's now becoming a bit better as Apple sort of open up their functionality, which is nice into the new tech. So augmented reality is useful for 3D structures. VR, if you need to put them in that world. Augmented reality is cheaper, easier. Any tablet works. Any phone will work with AR, putting a simple model in front of them, but it gives them that 3D. It also enhances interactivity. One of the things that I've got some students looking into is simply converting lectures and contents into AR, where it's the exact same audio, but the fact that you're holding the model and rotating it, you're tapping on the screen, is a lot more interactive. It's a lot more engaging. And so that's something which is useful and does help. We haven't measured engagement as such yet. We're looking at that in the future in research. But we've measured content before and after, and it's very much, they'll still learn from a lecture or AR. The actual research is pretty consistent, but it's one of the things that the experience is much better. And we're trying to give that experience. They've come into class, they can use the models, the plastic models. I can also add diseases to this. So the plastic models are always person A. Look at the back of this picture here. Like any anatomy lab, we have all of these plastic models, whether you're using these in other classes as well, but they're always the same generic person. The heart always looks the same, whereas in real life it doesn't. So one of the great things about cadavers is that anatomical variation. One of the great things about technology, we can simply add a stroke. We can add multiple sclerosis. We can change different things. So there's a lot that we can do there to, I guess, tweak the body. And this is consistent then using AR with things like architecture, paramedics, history, looking at buildings and changes. So there's a lot of uses for it, but the fact that we can change the model, or I can't in static images, I can't with textbook images, I can't with silicon models. So it allows a lot more variation in what I'm teaching. Here's some more pictures of AR being used in our classes. That's actually the brain lesson I was showing then. Students in one of my labs. Same again, we're talking 5-minute as a station. So one lab will do the brain, we'll be talking about it, looking at it, go across to the back station, do a 5-minute AR, really hold the model and then get back to the teaching as it is, or back to the normal lab. So at no point do we ever use technology to replace any teaching. I only use it to supplement and add to the teaching. Which seems to me to be the right way to do it. Particularly, I'm only using it to fill gaps that I can't do myself. So let's do the eye, let's do the brain, 3D in there, come back and I'll try and draw it, but now you've seen it for real, let's see how we go. So moving on, there's another little fun picture. These markers, it's a 3D printed structure, which is just a random color. Anything works, as long as it's different. So each side is different. So there's nothing special about these boxes. I just went to pattern generator online and printed that. But you can print anything as an AR marker, and it's something worth looking into, I think, because we all have phones, and there's a little example there. There's the skull again in AR for different models. There's another brain one there. So a lot of fun. And yeah, they all look a bit like not having that much fun, but they're having fun. It's a better learning experience based on the research. I'll tell you that much. Now, there's little examples there of the brain and some early ones and how you sort of use it, but that's okay. Now, the next one is a little bit different. So if we want to do VR, but we don't want to invest in computers and cables, one other option then is this. This is the Gear VR. I have one here. And how the Gear VR works, it does, yeah, Tyler textbooks, thanks, Sue. No, it very much is the whole, yeah, it's still a teaching lab. So the Gear VR is great because what happens is we just simply plug a phone, if I can get a phone, you plug a phone into the top and that becomes a little VR device. This is a Samsung one, which means if you have Samsung phones, these are about $99, I think, for the actual kit. And you can get VR from any mobile phone. Very simple functioning in the right drawer, top right drawer. I have some phones. I actually had a phone out and then I went and put it away. That's why I'm like, why is this phone out? Oh, now I realize. So, yep. You plug a phone into the Gear VR, it clicks in and that becomes a VR device. Nowhere near as powerful as the Oculus Rift, which plugs into a computer with a graphics card, but it's a simple way to get VR to the class. And because there's no wires and no cables, it's a really easy thing to do. However, please make sure there's also some interactivity because it's not VR currently. So you may have seen these, Bond have them as marketing, and these devices where you can plug your phone into the little stands and turn cardboard. It's not VR as such. It's just a close video. So this one here, one of the things about the VR that I'm a bit passionate about is it's got to be sensory deprivation. It's a virtual environment. Just simply putting your eyes into this is not VR. That's just watching a video. And if you notice here, if you look at the students in these pictures, we have their hands are in a controller and they've got headphones on. So now we can convert this into VR. Eyes, ears, and hands in that virtual environment. So for all these, so that's something I'm very passionate about. So that's one of the issues with virtual reality is 10 years ago, any computer screen was called virtual reality. Nowadays, like 360 video or just simply video is called VR. But I still feel that it's not really a virtual reality unless your hands and ears are in there as well. So I always add a bit of audio to it. Yeah, to make it just not that I want to be purist, but it seems like that's the better experience to use the technology. If it's just simply to watch a video, just watch a video. So, yeah. And that's one thing that I see a lot of students coming in watching videos in VR, whereas actually the computer monitors are better quality. But there are some cost-effective ways to get VR into the classroom, just to show that. And we use that quite a bit. Support is a little bit hit and miss. One of the problems is the more devices that you have, the more of a pain it is when you start the lesson because there's updates for some of these devices nearly weekly. The Hololens I'll show you, there's massive updates every month. So one of the things is just maintenance. I wouldn't want to have a classroom with 30 or 40 VR setups. I really wouldn't because just you go to use it and 30 or 40 updates. Plus the apps that we make get broken with new updates. So there is that setup cost, I guess, and you got to get into any class when I'm using tech. I have to get in there 1, 2, 3 hours early, set everything up first, update everything because they're required updates. and then use them, or keep them all offline. And one problem is our IT group at universities don't like things being offline because then they can't be updated. They're not on the server anymore. So it's a bit of a trade-off working with IT and the safety requirements of technology in the university, and working with something that's usable that doesn't take us as academics half a set up before we use them. I've also had, yeah, and I'll get back. Yeah, Dan's got a good point. I'll get to that question in a minute. So it's one of the things that using technology, I have had updates, compulsory updates that get rolled out right in the center of my class. So every device will just stop and say update required, and it could take half an hour to update, and now all of a sudden I've lost my tech lesson. So that does happen. It's nice to be kind of at the forefront sometimes, but on the other hand, at the forefront means constant updates, and a lot of that. Now, in regards to, so one of the things then just asked, like, can VR be used in the online, so away from campus? It can. It's one of those things that, my entire focus on the tech is to get students into campus doing stations better so they're part of that learning experience. But I have trouble. There's a lot of tricky stuff. For example, with AR, for example, if your finger is covering the marker, it doesn't work. And people at home try and use it, and they're like, it doesn't work, it's not picking up the marker. Well, your finger's on it. Whereas in person, we can pick that up instantly and say, oh, this is what's wrong. Put it under a better light. So there's still a lot of teething problems which can be frustrating to students off campus. I find if I'm not in the room, it never works as well because of simple things like that. Locking the marker with your hand, which seems to be the natural, how you hold an object tightly. So I find it challenging personally to do any of this off campus. Maybe it'll get easier as we get more innate into it, but I'm still very focused on that on-campus experience. And we can talk at the end about how can we enhance off campus as well. This is an example here of classes. So I run stations. So you'll see here I've got the Gear VR going, and then in the back here I've got the AR, and I've got the Oculus right at the back, a bit more VR, plastic models and things as well. So, 5-minute, 3 rotations of 5 minutes, different devices based on their strengths, then back to the class to talk. And that's sort of how we run a lot of ours. So one of the things, VR's fine and it's great. There are a few issues. Students get dizzy, they get uncomfortable. It can become difficult to teach. Like, I sort of have to keep quiet while they're in it because their ears are in that environment. Same with the AR, they've got the headphones on, so we kind of lose it. So there are a few issues. The one thing I've been looking for is trying to fill the gap. There's one other thing as well, and that's that a med student came to me and said, I hate this. So, why? Because whenever I learn, I have to write. And my eyes and my hands and my ears are all in there and I can't take notes. And she was just simply tried to write just to try and get something out of it, and just ended up with scribbles on the page. And so for some students that made sense. I had a device and I created what I thought was an amazing experience that some students found that's not how I learn. I can't learn by being blocked out from the outside world. I want to be in the inside world. So how then can I find a technology that is, can still give me that ability to show muscles and things in 3D space while they can still take notes and learn like they can in any other lesson? And that's where I started searching for different things like that. So one of the techs has been 3D printing, an old tech, I guess. This is what we call little DaVincis in schools. They go into schools and we give them like a brain or a heart, for example, and then students can paint it and paint the areas on. Here's a nice, great heart. 3D printing has been beautiful because it's the same as the silicon models, but I can add the diseases. I can add Alzheimer's, or I can add some multiple sclerosis lesions to the brain, or we can add certain features where it needs to be. So 3D printing's been fun, and it's one way that I can still use tech in the same models as I would in AR, but I can print it out and hold it. I can also take it into the classroom, into the lecture theatre, pass it around the class. So it's something that 3D printing has been somewhat useful. Here's an example here of some pictures I've sort of just posted in the past. I've got spines. Giving students a 3D printed blank model and a paintbrush has been a lot of fun, actually, where they can go along and learn. They're learning the artwork, the blood, which is a vein, which is an artery, and how this can work. I know it's very much used in architecture and history and other courses, but it's something that 3D printing exists. Most universities have a 3D printer. You can see in that picture there, I've got red blood cells, white blood cells, skulls, a pelvis, some of these from MRI scans, a bit of chemistry there as well for chemistry and science teachers. So the mandible and antibody there for immunology subjects. So I find 3D printing is a nice little tech that's sort of nothing, it's something they can hold and see and do, same as you can in AR. So I'm actually trying to get sometimes away from the screen, and this is one way of doing it with still the same benefits, but they can still write and learn. The there's a cool example of student there holding. So as well as the silicon models, and then using them together. So having a 3D printed skull, which I have connected to the actual normal skull and showing the differences. Fidget spinners, I don't use them at all. I thought it was funny. I don't know. I just thought it was no one uses them anymore. The other one then is another tech that I found, just to mention a few while we're here. It's a little bit adding now, is like back channel. And if you've heard of this, it's worth looking up. In the lecture, so if you're in a lecture environment in the first couple of weeks of term, I found that I get far less interactivity in a lecture. So the other tech's sort of in labs. But something back channel, I have a tablet and a monitor and a screen at the front, and we can use Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, online forums. There used to be some great free ones, I think Polev, Blackboard Collaborate, what we're using now, they can all log into that. And you simply put at the front, in front of you, next to the screen, a little live feed, and the students can type questions and write things on back channel. The reason I do this is because, especially when I'm teaching first semester, it's the students are a bit shy to ask questions or interact with you as much as they would otherwise. By about week 5, it's fine, they put their hands up. But I thought if students are coming to class, I want them interacting and involving themselves and engaging at every opportunity. Even outside of labs. And so back channel, so live chat between me and between the student and I during the lectures has been something which has been really useful, and I'd highly recommend it at least for your first 3 or 4 weeks, because it gives the shy students a chance to ask questions. Now, in the first week, 90% of the comments are silly ones like, wow, lecturers don't wear ties, or is it time for the break yet? Or silly comments between the students. But by about week 2 and 3, the novelty's worn off. And then I find that, so from having 90% silly comments, which are sometimes a bit funny and silly, but by week 3, you're getting the only people that log into it are those that have something to say. So any chance to use tech to help interactivity and engagement has been really useful. So I think I just threw that slide in there just a little, remind me to talk about it. The other thing I've been using a lot with technology surrounding the lectures has been YouTube. So YouTube channel there, Physiology with Christian. Instagram has been something useful to really get this, to feel like the students can communicate with me as an academic outside of class. That was a private Instagram just for us, whereas now it's sort of open for all. And then gamification. I'll try and show you some pictures, but I created a computer game for my students just because when we were doing a test, I had a very basic stock game, and I had the students try out VR, AR, and this very basic computer game, and just see what did you enjoy more. One of those side studies you do with no data just to see what they like. And unanimously, they all said the computer game was the most interactive and the most enjoyable. Yeah, I sort of used it as a control, as like, here's an old tech versus new VR, new AR. And so I spent a bit more time on it. If you ever want to have a look, it's a free game, so everything I do is free. There's no monetization on YouTube or Instagram or this. So if you want to type in The King's Request, Anatomy and Physiology Revision game, you run around and you use your anatomy knowledge to kill monsters. So, for example, the zombie has a weak occipital lobe, so a weak eyesight. So which lobe of the brain would you stab him with a stake in to hurt? So it's like, it's a little action game, but I'm hoping it works to help them with their knowledge. But that's been something that's really built a lot of rapport as well, doing little fun things. There's a lot of ways to make easy games online. I think Facebook have a bunch of things. And it's something kind of fun. So I think I have some screenshots later as I'm just going through a bunch of, so here's for example, my YouTube channel. I try and give a video each week for my students, and I thought, why not make it public? So that's been something, a lot of fun that I'm trying to get out now. It's just the things that I make for my students, making them public has been fun. So YouTube's been a nice little platform to use tech as well. There's Instagram. Thanks, David. There's the game there on Steam if you use it. There's also, it's on Android, and there is, I'll actually give you a HTML link, which anyone can look at from any computer. I'll put that up in a minute. Actually, oh yeah, so I'll find that. Actually, let me see if I can put up now while we're doing it. If you want to, I wonder if these links here work. Let's click this and see. Do links work on PowerPoint? No, they don't. Okay, that's fine. So coming through, no, it's all right. So here's an example of the game anyway. And yeah, so there's a few. There's an Android version for phones, there's an iPhone version, but there is one just website you can play it without having to install anything. So here's an example here of where would you attack his eyesight. It's the vampire with the eyesight, not the zombie. This one here, Ghost Weekend. So basically every week of our class, just before the midsem, I release this. And it's just fun, but it's this was because revision was always boring when I was at university. Revision activities were, just cram the textbook in as fast as you can, and students weren't having fun with revision. So I thought, why don't we make a revision activities rather than just worksheets? And so this is where this came from, trying to enhance the revision. But have a look at it, and if you're interested in this sort of thing, how do I create a game or do something fun? Even PowerPoint, you can have little, you click the answer and it goes to another slide. You can have choose your own adventures on PowerPoint. Gamification of revision has been something which for me, I'm quite, I guess I get a lot out of, because it's something that was always for me at uni. Revision was a cram and a stress and not fun. And so helping the students make revision a little bit more fun and enjoyable is something that has been really rewarding for me as an educator. These are little examples of just websites that I do as well, trying to link in. One of the things, the new keyword has been interprofessional education. This is one of the things that we'll talk about stroke, and they'll come along here and you'll see I've got like a dietitian report, I give a scientist report, occupational therapy. You call around friends who are in different disciplines and say, hey, can you give me a 2-minute video or a 1-minute video on how you handle stroke or how you handle dementia, for example, and we get a nice little, so as they're learning about the disease in class, they'll hear from different health professionals about how they do it. And that's been really fun, because I know that interprofessional education is a new thing that we're trying to get more involved with, especially in courses like medicine, the other APRA registered, communicative big healthcare teams that our students aren't always involved with. So little videos on a website that go for a minute or two each from people in different fields have been really useful and beneficial. And once again, another way to use technology in class. So I feel like it's a little bit all over the place because I've tried to cram everything in, but the point of this is, how can we use technology in class to enhance that experience? And this is one way I've been doing it. So I'll give a lecture and I'll have a 1-minute video from a nurse, psychologist, physio. They can come along and have a little watch. And it just seems to help link it up with other courses. So the thing is, what are we working on now? Actually, this is where Charlotte comes in with her project. So one of the things where we trial things out in research before releasing it to students. But one of the problems that I said before about like VR and sort of those texts is that you can't take notes. So how do we fill the gap then between having a student involved in a virtual environment but then not out of the classroom? And this is where new devices have come in. I'm a little bit hesitant about checking out tech because it's new. In the past, technology has gone through these incredible booms and then fizzled and flopped. Australia was the first country in the world to have more computers than students in schools, and yet achievement wasn't enhanced. Throwing technology and computers at kids does not help. At students in tertiary or school or primary environments hasn't helped achievement. So why do we use computers? The thing is, things seem different. All the tech I've spoken about so far, this Oculus is owned by Facebook. The Gear VR is owned by Samsung. The device I'm going to show you now is owned by Microsoft. There's other ones, for example, this is another one owned by Oculus, owned by Facebook. All of a sudden, in education technology or in tech we can use in class, there's multi-billion-dollar companies investing huge amounts of pride and money into it. It's very different from that the salesman used to come around. I used to be a high school teacher. The salesman would come around schools and try and sell you this new product and this niche product which you'd never hear from later on. It seems now it's a different landscape. The technology is being used very much in gaming, but also education purposes, but there's millions and millions and millions of dollars spent into it. It seems like it's here to stay. It's very, very different now with these large companies all investing money. Even Apple now, as I'm saying, are coming on board with AR and getting a lot more involved with it. So it seems like it's here to stay. I think it's different than what it was in the past because of that massive infrastructure and investment. But the next sort of tech that we're looking into is same again. So AR and VR is showing great benefit. However, there's a few issues, like I said before. And this is called the Hololens. This is the newest device that I'm rolling out this semester for the first time. I trialed it in a class last semester. Charlotte's doing the honors project researching the effectiveness of it. Is it actually useful? But this is a device, I'll get to put it on the mirror. This is a device which is a mix between VR and AR. It's mixed reality. It is a VR device. It's a bunch of layers and layers of glass, but it projects holograms in front of you. So you can still be in that virtual environment where there's a brain floating in front of you. You can walk around it and experience it, but you can still interact with the outside world. Here, pop it on. We'll have a look. Charlotte's looking at teaching asthma education. One of the things about learning things like diseases, we've done stroke already, I mentioned, but asthma is people don't fully understand or grasp the science behind it. What are the bronchioles? What's the trachea? Where is it being constricted? So we're wondering if we can use holograms to give to general people in the public and try and work out, is there a way to show and really show that lungs and explain a disease like asthma with that anatomy being showcased. So I don't know how clear it is on the video, but I wonder if I can bring the video up. Nope, it's all right. But this is something that has been really useful actually, and we're hoping shows a bit of promise. So that's our current research. The HoloLens, if it works, would actually be something that would get away from the VR, having to have students just blocked off from the outside world, because it's kind of like an AR, but their hands are free, they can write, they can see through it. I still can't see what she's looking at. There are ways to stream it to a screen, which is an issue, but I've got a couple of these HoloLenses. We can put a few on and we can all look at the same model and interact at the same time, which is great. So there's an example there from Microsoft's website. Once again, Microsoft, one problem with the HoloLens is the military last year purchased $100-something million of HoloLenses. So it's a shame because they were really focused on education, and now the military applications of AI, having things like night vision embedded in them, might remove the focus on education, which Microsoft currently have, but we'll see. But for now, that's an example there where you get that VR environment without being locked away and deprived to the rest of the world. So here's a student in our class having a look at that. Yep. So you can come along, interact. This is last semester, one of my physiology classes. Here's us using a few of them just as a device. Here's a student here, right? Actually, look, yeah, look, taking notes while in the VR environment through the HoloLens. So it's something that actually, I'm not using it because it's new tech. I'm trialing it because there were limitations in VR that students complained about, and I want to try and meet the students' needs and requests. So that was something that sort of, once again, out of necessity, we're trialing new tech to see how it goes. So to chat a little bit about the research and how that works, this is Anna. She's about to finish her PhD, but she's been looking for a few years and did her honours on the difference between VR and AR and how they work, what's best. Through years of research, we've sort of found that there's really no difference. Whether you teach just through a lecture or you teach through VR, the students learn the same, which is good because we know that lectures work. We're not doing it wrong. So the only difference is the experience. There's no necessity, so the effectiveness of VR and AR, there's no necessity to come and study using VR. There's no necessity for it. There's no real benefit. Maybe in anatomy there's a financial benefit to remove cadavers and put in VR, but I don't like that at all. You can imagine I still like the traditional teaching. These just supplement and add to our teaching. They don't replace anything. So there's no necessity to move to it. There's no real benefit for learning, but the experience is a little bit better. And for me as an educator, it sort of fills that gap between where I can't draw very well. It allows me to give models of disease and other things to students that I couldn't before. So I find it personally quite enriching and empowering. Thanks, Debbie. That's all right. Yeah, we'll finish in a few minutes. So little tips for one thing. We've written a conversation article in the past and tried to make this a bit more focused around schools and how we use it. But linking this to the university environment for tertiary educators is one of the things that we've learned over the years have been ways to use it effectively rather than just put them in a VR and walk away. One of the things is using two ways. So where I would otherwise have a 2D image of the brain, with virtual reality or holograms, I can have the same 3D image of the brain, but also an audio podcast. You heard with the AR, it's me talking in the background. So it allows me to talk and show and model all at once. One thing I've been trying as well is to get creative with it for the students. And I didn't mention this at all because I'm not that good at it yet, but we found over years of research and just asking students what they want, a lot of our students in medicine and science and all fields come with such creative minds and skills and abilities. We have some incredible artists. We have some incredible people that make big Lego Star Wars huge models, and we don't foster that at all. And I did a review last year of my teaching, and I found that I don't foster creativity anywhere in my course because it doesn't seem to fit science. We seem to, we love recall and eidetic memories and personal skills and things like medicine, but what about creative? What about the artists? And I'm thinking technology is one thing that I'm going to try and use to assist students to be more creative. And I've started doing things like using Minecraft, and rather than say, fill this worksheet out, right, let's make a block image of the brachial plexus, which is a quite complicated nervous system, and getting the students to actually create it in Roblox or Minecraft or something free on their phones or on their devices just for 10 minutes. So tech's been a way to utilize creativity, and I do a little bit of it in the VR and AR, but nowhere near as much as I want. So that's one of my recommendations, and things that we're finding is that I'm not doing it well, but we really could use technology to help get those creative students being creative in class, which I haven't done in the past. Another one then is getting them moving. In a sort of 2-3 hour lab that we run, sitting down using VR hasn't been as useful. So things like using QR codes around the room, using AR, and getting students up and moving. Notice their stations are always moving has been something else that's good. So having, rather than just crowd around one cadaveric model like we used to do, we're still doing that, but they're now moving around the room. And the movement seems to help. It just seems to change that cognitive load, snaps them out of different things, gets their blood moving. At a 3 hour lab, they're not all tight at the end like they used to be. And also having times when all phones and all media goes off. This is actually something I've started doing in lectures. Right, they do a Facebook check-in over the break. Right, all phones off, everything on silent. 10 minutes. Let's do it. All computers down. Let's go through this one thing. And I know it's kind of like a high school, primary school kind of thing to do, which the recommendation came from. But I find students kind of like it. Some of particularly the mature age students, get distracted by the other students all on their phones. And so everyone seems to enjoy it and get it and be off their phones for 10 minutes. I've really liked it in class, and I don't know, it's something different. So I just had to put that in because it's not just use more tech, trying to get away from tech. The last one was very much for high schools. But one thing that we're doing a lot more of now in tertiary medicine and science is there's a big assault against good data online, as we know, the anti-vax campaigns and campaigns of misinformation and pseudoscience. And so one thing is trying to help the students online understand the right from the wrong and the motivations behind some bias and something. So becoming good citizens online as scientists and graduates in all fields, understanding there's misinformation, how do we detect it, how do we find it, how do we get around that? So in the last minute, my recommendations. Integrate out of necessity. Don't just put VR or tech or things because we don't. The reason we're spending all these years and money on HoloLenses is because it's a necessity. I want to give students a VR experience because that works, but well, this may to write. It's tricky to get universities to fund this. All this tech's be funded by research grants that I've got. It's one of the things that you can get support for lab-based research, which I do as well, but I also find that tricky. So it's not that expensive doing things like the $100 Gear VRs, but I understand that cost is an issue, and it's hard to get teaching-related funding sometimes for this sort of tech. So when it's needed, and know that I need to teach the brainstem through VR because I can't draw it very well, and so it's worth it putting the effort in to get it working. Same again, you notice that it's very much teacher directed. Small stations, we're very much directing the session rather than walking out the room. I want to find tech that I can work with. Also, be wary that it only lasts about 3 years. You put a lot of money into tech, in 3 years you got to reinvest it. There's not the lifespan like there used to be. So just be wary that if you put a lot of money into technology, it's going to be a huge amount of time, and it's not a long-term investment. For me, it empowers me. It gives me more of an ability to use technology in a way to bridge gaps where I can't teach. And also just remember that putting more computers, more tech into a class hasn't in the past been correlated with achievement. So there's no real benefit there. So a few references, and thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations. Amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun. So,
I mean, a lot of work to optimize and blend this, but I really love the fact that this is Mauro, by the way, from Curtin. I love the fact that you highlight something that I largely agree. I mean, you don't have to use for everything. It's exactly what I like to use, this kind of stuff: skull, neck, the brain, maybe the inside of the heart, maybe the pelvis. And this is amazingly interesting. And also, you highlight something that is important. If you invest, you have to be careful because the lifespan of this technology is short, as you said. I mean, 3 years, 2-3 years is important. And I'll tell you why this. Because here at Curtin, we ask for is a kind of a important moment for anatomy, because we ask for a new building, and the stakeholders, the university didn't say yes, but it didn't say no either. You know, and there's going to be a huge debate. Actually, it's going to, in a month's time, we're going to have a huge meeting between us, anatomists, as well as stakeholders, etc., to how to proceed to improve this, etc. And this kind of ASCILITE webinar couldn't be better timing for me as well as for us. You know, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
And I know also another thing is that we don't have yet this. I mean, the money is an issue.
Well, that's the same thing. It's been.
Exactly.
We had some funding from companies, and I've been out there trying to get some funding, but it's tricky, and it's, you know, to get a big grant and then 3 years later have all the technology old. But
exactly.
But saying again, that's one of the things that for me, I'm doing it to bridge gaps out of necessity. So I see it as worth it. But I mean, I wouldn't want a room of 30 VR devices. That would be just taxing. So
okay.
You know, I like a couple, use it in stations, and 5 minutes per session seems to work for me. It's not the
has to be more of an integration again for the part of the gap of brainstorm is a gap even for us. Yes. Thank you so much. Really,
thank you very much.
Appreciate this. Very good, very good. I don't know if someone else has some other question. I'm listening. By the way, another thing that I like is that exactly, you don't have to be technology oriented. Technology has to be ancillary to learning, as you said. I mean, it's absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And inspiring. I will know more about the big meeting about us that I told you in a few weeks. HoloLens is expensive. I mean, it's still, these guys are still expensive, correct?
Yeah, the HoloLens is $3,000 to $4,000 each, but they're not out yet. So these are still development kits. My biggest worry is layers and layers and layers of glass. If a student drops it, it's gone. That's my biggest worry. The thing is, they're only in development now. They'll be coming out soon in the next 12 months, and when they come out, they make a lot more, which means that, you know, cost of scale will come down much more. But they're kind of making them one by one at the moment for developers to get used to them. Watch this space. We'll have some papers out hopefully on it to see if it's useful.
Great. I like even the scientific part. You try to prove, to measure the impact of this stuff. I love it.
Yeah, and sometimes it gets gimmicky because I was such a big fan of VR, and our research very much humbled us to the fact that, okay, it's not as good as we thought. You don't need it. It's good, but you don't need it. There's no necessity. It's just good if you have a use for it.
For some gaps. Yeah, I like the augmented reality better. I mean, we have some issue here in where to use it because we have an old facility. Of course, we cannot integrate technology so well with the facility because you cannot use the device inside, otherwise we go to jail. Actually, I'm the anatomy license holder. Yeah, I'm very sensitive about these issues. Yeah, I mean, it's a matter even of how we organize eventually the new building.
Yeah, the good thing with AR as well is the tablets can be used elsewhere. So we use it. I mean, you can use these to do surveys. I can do online quizzes on them.
Yeah.
So having 30 tablets is so much more useful than having 30 VR devices. They're both useful, but I find I use these a lot more. So for an investment, AR's great for that extra benefit.
We are trying, but it's not easy to get the money.
It's not easy. I know.
Anyway, excellent.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have time for one more question, if anyone's got a question. Okay, well, seeing none, thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Oh, actually, I have a question.
Oh.
I'm stupid.
Yes.
Maybe you told already. Is this presentation and the slides available on the ASCILITE website? Yes.
They will be available following the session. Usually,
even by tomorrow, it's okay. I mean,
we usually endeavor to have them up in a week's time.
That's okay. 1 week, 10 days time. Beautiful.
Yeah. So.
And I have actually a last question for Christian. Yep. Is your YouTube channel, free, available, or all these?
Everything's free. I don't I want to try and share resources, so I don't monetize anything because I worry that a student might see an ad and just skip the channel and not look at it. So I'd much rather do that. It did come up against me at like in promotions interviews where they're like, Wayne, you're not making no money out of any of these resources. And I'm like, well, I don't want to.
Oh, okay, because your stakeholders, like everyone else stakeholders, they look at the money. Say,
they do, but
what a pain.
I released the game and it had on Steam, one of the links that David put, the other link will work for everything, but it was, I had like 20,000 downloads the first day and thought, if I made it $1, but then I'd rather get more downloads because it's free and have more students use it. So it's a bit of a,
and, you did the program with the games, because I'm very, intrigued by that, but it takes time to prepare this stuff.
It does, but I found it I have a lot of fun. It's one of those, I guess coming from a school teacher, I still want to do little activities with the students, and so tech's been
it's amazing.
Yeah, but I've linked to the game in the chat there. It should just work on the that /game. That'll work on any computer, any device on your phone.
I'll try to play by myself.
Yeah, please do. I've got to update it. It's just a fun little thing.
Great. Again, I have more hits now, even for my kids. I already started medical teaching and this.
So Christian, sorry to interrupt.
But, no, okay.
Just one more question, Christian. So we had a question from Sue. Is it possible for us to maybe put up that reference list out of the presentation, and make that available?
Of course.
With the recording.
Yeah, please do.
Yep.
Please. Cool. That's our papers recently about that. So. And little book chapters and things like merging technologies. The top one, for example, is like how do we link AR and VR together, or how do we merge two of these techs together? So little ideas we've had. I'm very excited to see Charlotte's research actually from the Hololens. She's only in her fourth week, but see where that goes and what comes out of that, because the Hololens might just not work, but if it does, it just gives us that extra chance. So.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
please do. Yeah. I'm happy to share all this and everything else. So, and check out the Instagram if you're around. That's good. I'll try and post more often. But it's actually been a really nice way to connect with the students. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for this ASCILITE Live webinar. And thanks for Christian for sharing your passion and just some fantastic work that you're doing. We hope everyone found the session useful, and please, if you've not already subscribed to the ASCILITE mailing list, please do that. We will let you know about any future ASCILITE Live webinars on there, and of course the webinars are always listed on the website as those come up to be scheduled. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next month.